Good evening and welcome to our election eve special live stream. I may be being joined by some other representatives of the family party later in the evening. We shall see. Some people might pop up for a little while. But a few things to talk about tonight. And as for all of the time, we won't have a special guest. I'm going to do 5 questions in as well, questions and comments. There will be lots of opportunity for me to interact with those. I've got a few topics as well we can talk about. Just an update following last night's live stream. John Naples Campbell, the sort of transvestite head teacher of Kinloch Burvey High School. We did the live stream about the sort of degenerate queer theory book in the school library. I actually emailed him saying, if you're saying you're going to remove this book, then okay, that's that. If you're not going to remove it, then I am going to pursue a complaint against you with the council, with the General Teaching Council of Scotland. He's replied saying, basically, go ahead and complain. So that is exactly what I will do. But isn't that amazing? General Teaching Council of Scotland had my case against me for 3 years for saying children need a mum and a dad ideally. They've just had a 5-year case against someone before it amounted to nothing because someone objected to like LGBT teaching in schools. But when it comes to someone promoting, presenting, having a book in the library with these sort of messaging, utterly appalling, degenerate, perverted filth in the school library, he's absolutely confident. He says, you go ahead and report me. I don't care. I'm going to be fine. Well, maybe he will. Who knows? Who knows? But I think as a public service, it's necessary to try and do something about this and protect children from what I assume are his values. If he's defending this book, if he's not saying, look, very sorry, I'll take it out, I assume he's thinking this is what should be in the school library. And well, we'll take it from there. Highland Council, what will they make of it? Highland Council's got a lot of independent councillors. You might have thought, there'd be quite a decent bunch up there, independent councillors in the Highlands, a bit more conservative. But I think actually not. When it comes to the crunch on this sort of issue, to be honest, I don't think they're much use at all. That's our impression so far. But we shall see. We shall see. Time will tell. So do fire questions in. So what's going to happen tomorrow? The big day. Looking forward to seeing the results. Obviously, I'm not going to spend the whole evening saying vote Scottish Family Party, but obviously that's what we would urge you all to do. So a few things to talk about. The French elections taking place, the National Rally Party, which to be honest, I don't know much about. They get called far right. I think their economic policies are pretty hard left. But I don't know much about the party. I'm not wanting to comment on that in particular. But their prime minister designate, who may become the prime minister, is a young fella. He was saying the other day, children need their mother and father, ideally. Isn't that great? Yet another politician talking about family life, emphasizing the value of family life. Now, Meloni in Italy, very much like that. I mean, other leaders around Europe as well, they're very much taking this line. And it's a relatively new thing coming back into politics. And if you went back, not that long, actually, maybe even only 30 years, it was quite common. Even Barack Obama used to say, children need their dad. It's really important. Children need a dad. So we need policies that make sure children have got their dad. Come on, men, step up and be committed and be a dad to your kids. I mean, Barack Obama doesn't say that anymore, because that, of course, would be homophobic, because that's assuming that families are a mother and a father. Well, really, you can't assume that. But it's definitely coming back with more and more people willing to state that. Where's the Reform Party on that, might you say? Would they say children need their mum and a dad ideally? I would suggest no. That would be too controversial for them. They're sort of a half a toe in the water about promoting marriage. But do they mean marriage of a man and a woman, or any marriage? They would mean any marriage. So when they're saying they want to give a tiny little tax break for marriage in order to encourage people to get married and have kids, they're including same-sex couples in that, which I think doesn't really go along with the social conservative position, which is that traditional position, children should be brought up by their mum and dad where possible. Anyway, so it was nice to hear that from the gentleman in France. Now, I say it's nice to hear it. I mean, that's assuming his other views don't turn out to be really appalling. Like, you can find Putin would probably say, yeah, children should be brought up by their mum and dad. But it doesn't actually help our cause, does it? But the bloke in France, he was saying this, and that's good. I don't know much else about him, but it was nice to hear it. There was John, am I going to the count? I'm not going to the count. Instead of going to the count, I'm going on holiday. My family holiday should have started a few days ago, and we had to move it back because of the election. So we're actually heading off tomorrow. So I've only ever been to one count. I mean, staying up half the night for it, I don't necessarily find it the most fruitful thing to do at the end of an election campaign. But yeah, I think quite a few of our candidates are going to the count. It is an interesting experience. So, Rob, you're actually in Russia, are you? Okay. Glad not to be involved as well with GP politics. Think Labour will win. Yeah, that's not the boldest prediction of the night, I would imagine. But it's certainly looking that way. Now, the BBC put out a news report today that was quite remarkable. It was about a mother who is getting on a bit now, in more advanced years, and she's also got a terminal illness. She's not going to live for much longer. And she's confessed that she helped end the life of her young son, a young child, many, many years ago because he was ill. And that was the BBC headline. This mother said that she helped to end his life. I mean, a more accurate headline would be she admits to murdering her son. But no, this is the BBC. BBC have always been the cheerleaders for assisted suicide and euthanasia. And the way the story was told, it was, how brave for speaking up. You obviously did the right thing at the time. It was very compassionate and loving, just presenting, basically giving her the stage to tell her story from her point of view. So yeah, the BBC keeping up their track record of being the cheerleader for assisted suicide and euthanasia. With the Labour government, will that happen in the UK? I would, looking at my crystal ball, Robert, I would say almost certainly within the coming term of the UK government, they will fully decriminalise abortion to allow abortion up to full term for any reason. So, babies torn limb from limb and killed just before birth. And they'll be, I mean, anyone who votes for that, if you vote for Labour, that's what you're voting for. That's what's coming. Because the people pushing that, I mean, they're all in the Labour Party, so that's going to happen. Assisted suicide, again, I would say almost definitely will happen UK-wide. Once they've happened in the UK, if Scotland's a step behind in the progressive direction, that's not going to last long, is it? We'll have a Labour government here before too long. The SNP might do these things in any case. So in terms of these issues, a Labour government will be a major step in the wrong direction. Is a Conservative government a step in the right direction? No, not remotely. A Conservative government is maybe a smaller step in the wrong direction. That's the sad state of UK politics. And the Reform Party, where do they figure in this on these issues? Nowhere. Nothing to say about them, no policy, don't care. So if you don't care about them as well, then Reform could be a party for you to vote for. Right, time for people to vote for what they believe in. Absolutely. Absolutely. For so long, I find it remarkable that people vote for parties that absolutely hate, not just contradict, hate their values, who try to demonize their values. And it's not just sort of trivial issues, really core, fundamental moral values. But a lot of people think, for some reason or another, that you shouldn't decide who to vote for based on the fact that the party is going to enact terrible evils and corrupt children. It's though, they're not proper political issues. You've got to vote on the basis of other issues. And then having voted for a party that completely contradicts their values, people then spend the next 5 years complaining about them and writing letters to them and saying, well, please don't do this. But please don't introduce assisted suicide. We'd really rather you didn't. It's against our values. But hang on Friday morning, the die is cast. That set of politicians will make the decisions. And you can write as many letters as you like and go and see them and have a nice cup of tea. It ain't going to make much difference at all. The die is cast on election day. So if there's one message I would like to get through to a lot of people in Scotland, it's please break out of this cycle of voting for people who totally disagree with you, hold contradictory values, actively hate your values, demonize your values, and then people vote for them in any case. And the main parties, they've learned that. They've learned, like in this election campaign, I've had more emails from pro-life organizations than probably every other cause put together. Now, just think about that. That's quite a statistic, isn't it? more emails on the pro-life issue from people saying, I want to check you're pro-life and I'll vote for you if you're pro-life. That's basically what they're saying. I've had more emails like that than about any other issue. All the other issues combined, in fact. Now, it's good to get those messages. I think it's very valuable. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying, what's the effect of it? Now, if people are thinking, if we can just get to the point where MPs and potential MPs, they're getting more letters and emails from us than anyone else, that'll really make the difference. Well, I'll tell you, that already happens. Candidates in this election get more emails from pro-lifers than from everyone else combined. And what will it achieve in terms of changing the views of the people who get elected? Not very much. Now, if people are emailing in order to decide who to vote for, then, that can make a difference. That can make a difference. But if you're hoping to influence them, then really that's not going to happen. Right, what have we got here? John, Peter Hitchens has been urging everyone to vote Conservative in order to prevent the disaster of a Labour government. Why should I vote for the Family Party? Right, several reasons for that. Sorry, I'll just close my blind. I've got the sun in my face. Right, the first reason I would give is an overriding reason that I think overrides all others, and that's just a matter of conscience. So for me, I can't vote for a party that says we will continue the killing of unborn children. I can't say I will vote for a party that will continue the killing of unborn children because there's nothing I can put at the end of that sentence that makes me think, yeah, that sentence holds together. I'm happy with that. I'm going to go with that. So I think that's really important. The other thing with elections as well is it's a multi-election game. So the more votes we get this time, the more encouraged we are, the more credibility we've got, the more people are likely to vote for us next time. And we build up and build up and build up to the point of getting people elected. Another point is that every vote registers. In every constituency, people will look at the results. And if say, my constituency, I don't know, let's say 500 people vote for the Family Party, the media and the other parties, they'll look at that and think, right, that's 500 people. That's a fair chunk. And the other parties will either think, wow, there's a lot of crazy nutters there. Now, or they might think, we want some of these votes back. Right? How can we tweak our policies to try and get these people back on board and voting for us? And that starts to shift the policies of the main parties. Because I think with tactical voting, the people who commend tactical voting, their message is always, it's this time. It's this particular election. You need to vote tactically because this election is unique. It's not like all the others before and after it. This one's the unique one where you have to vote tactically. Then what will they be saying next time? They'll be saying, this is the unique one. You have to vote tactically. And I'm using the pro-life illustration because it's quite clear-cut. I'll use that again. Robert's got lots of other policies. So on the pro-life issue, if pro-lifers always think, well, we'll vote tactically at every election, then that's the strategy to never register the pro-life position at the polls, because there's always the tactical voting consideration. The other thing as well, people say, you're wasting your vote. What's the probability that your vote is going to determine the outcome of the election? Now, this is a bit of a complex philosophical issue to discuss. But what's the chance that your vote is going to be the vote that makes the difference? Virtually zero. There was one constituency in Scotland that was decided by one vote. It was maybe 10 years ago or something. It's happened once, and it's maybe the only time in the UK it's ever happened. So the probability that your one vote is going to change the outcome of the election is virtually non-existent. Virtually non-existent. And if you look at people who vote for the other parties, what percentage of people in an election vote for the party that wins? Well, maybe 35%, 40% if they're very lucky. What percent vote for the one who came second? 30, whatever. But then there's a lot of people who vote for parties who come third and fourth. Now look at the main five parties in the Scottish Parliament. They get very substantial numbers of votes in constituencies where they're not first or second. So a lot of people, a very substantial proportion of the electorate, vote for parties that they don't see it as a two-horse race. They vote for what they believe in. And because they vote for what they believe in, then I think those views register and they have an influence. So, John, that was quite a long answer. If you want to come back on that, fire something back and I'll respond to any more comments that you've got. That would be interesting. Right. John Naples Campbell feels he's invulnerable. Yes, it does appear that way. He's got some special recognition. I thought it was a special role. He says it's special recognition from the GTCS for his LGBT work. So he's their mate, basically. They're in the club together. So he's pretty confident that, I mean, who knows how that would work. I mean, the worst case scenario would be, I complain and they phone him up and say, oh, we've got this nutter Lucas on your case. He's terrible. We tried to nail him, but we didn't try and manage it. Didn't quite manage it. But he's on your case now. Don't worry, John. We'll tell him to get lost. That won't happen. But how far away from that it will be, well, we're not quite sure. Right, Sean, the first past the post voting system is making it difficult for voters. Some of them will vote for a candidate they actually want, others voting tactically. Absolutely agree. The first past the post system, I think, is terrible, and it needs to go. I would replace it with full proportional representation, and full proportional representation with the Scottish Parliament as well. Now, if there was full proportional representation for the Scottish Parliament, I believe I would be an MSP now. I would have been elected as an MSP at the last election, so the Scottish Family Party would have one MSP. And we'd now be looking at the UK elections. I would, on the basis of the publicity we'd have got from that, we'd probably be looking at getting a couple of MPs elected. The next Scottish election, we'd probably be looking at getting, I don't know, 3 or 4 MPs elected. I mean, who knows? Substantial increase. And it would be fair, and you could take the little steps as the popularity of your party grows. But the system is designed to stop that. It's designed to put barriers in the way of that. If we had full proportional representation in Scotland, I would be an MSP, I believe. Who else would be? Alex Salmond would be in with a couple of Alba ones. George Galloway would have got elected. I don't know if he'd still be there. He might have got bored and gone up and done something else. But would that have really made the Scottish Parliament a weaker institution to have these alternative voices in it? I would say absolutely not. It would have strengthened it very considerably. So, yes, absolutely agree with you there. Oh, wow. Well, John, that was amazing, wasn't it? Swinney's interview with Nicky Campbell was typical of the SNP. Coughed and spluttered over the question of how many genders there are. That was staggering. It was as though he'd never thought about the question before, wasn't it? It was just bizarre. It was as though he was totally caught on the hop by what's a really obvious and common question. And his answer, after a lot of umming and ahhing, was he thinks there's 2. To which obviously the question is, so why has the Scottish government got a non-binary action plan? So the First Minister says there is only male and female, but the Scottish government produced a document about how to help people who are not male and female. I mean, it makes no sense. It's incompetence. As well as the ideology being contorted gibberish, John Swinney is incompetent in not knowing what his own government's doing, and therefore he can't answer that simple question. So, yeah, that was quite a remarkable thing to listen to. Just on that subject, it's often assumed that people like us, we should say there's only 2 genders. I sort of get that. But I think on the other hand, another way of looking at it is the problem isn't the people who created other genders. The problem is they've created the idea that your gender is something different from your sex. And your gender determines your identity. So that determines whether you are a man or a woman, or male or female. I can't even remember which around it is. But it determines whether you're a man or a woman. This subjective sense of gender identity. Now, if gender identity is entirely subjective, who's to say there's not as many as anyone wants there to be? I mean, if someone says, if the definition of a man is someone who feels like they're a man, and the definition of a woman is a person who feels they're a woman, then obviously if someone feels they're a bit of both, then who's to argue with them? If gender identity just means, well, it's what you feel. So the problem is the whole idea of gender identity as something that determines whether you're a man or a woman and is independent of your biological sex. That whole philosophy, it's not that it's wrong in terms of it's not true, because it doesn't make a truth claim. It just redefines words. So the question is this ideology helpful? Is it fruitful? Does it produce positive consequences? And the answer is no. Right, I guess you're talking about the what they call National Rally Party in France. I don't know much about them. When the BBC calls a group far right, I'm very skeptical. I don't know what they mean by far right, and I don't know. I mean, but the Daily Mail said the Family Party was far right, which was like total idiocy incarnate. But that's what the Daily Mail said in the last election campaign. And the BBC interview as well managed to get the word fascist and neo-Nazi into his interview with me. I mean, anyone who came to a Family Party meeting or met people involved in the Family Party would realize immediately that that is an absolute joke to be making those sorts of admissions. Bryce, nice to see you. Admitting defeat already. I'm quite happy that my efforts have cost votes for the Scottish Family Party. Right, I think that's a tad delusional. Admitting defeat already. Okay, I concede. I don't think I'm going to win here in Edinburgh Southwest. Yeah, okay. So that makes you happy, Brian. That's right. I just talked about my constituency. J.K. Rowling endorsed Joanna Cherry as the candidate in my constituency at Edinburgh Southwest, because J.K. Rowling obviously is this sort of trans-exclusive feminist. She's argued against all of the trans things. And then she endorses Joanna Cherry. And I think it just shows, because some people sometimes say, oh, would J.K. Rowling not get behind the Family Party? To which I always say, definitely not. She's not a social conservative. She doesn't share our values on virtually every other issue. We just happen to overlap on this one little issue of the women's issue aspect of transgenderism, because that's the only bit that she's really interested in. So instead of supporting a candidate that would repeal the Gender Recognition Act and just pull up transgender ideology by the roots, finish it off once and for all, she wants to support a candidate who would protect women's spaces, tweak the Equality Act or whatever. So in other words, you still maintain the problem, but then try and ameliorate some of the symptoms. That's J.K. Rowling's approach. So she backed the wrong horse. Maybe people will be able to point that out to her at some points. Right, we've got any other comments here? Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, the big parties won't miss your vote. The Family Party will cherish your vote. Yeah, where does a vote make most impact? Does it make more impact by being, a tiny element of the big majority or whatever for the big parties, or does it make more of an impact on the Scottish Family Party total? Right, good point. I hadn't thought about that one before, but yes, I think that's very, very good point. I've been contacting the Labour candidate in Dundee Central who will likely be elected. He attends church as a Catholic. I asked about his views on abortion. It's a cliffhanger. It's a cliffhanger. Right, let's go to the next one. You ignored my emails. He's a practicing Catholic, but probably pro-abortion like Joe Biden. It's amazing what candidates will say when they're on the election trail. That's always the problem with the email your candidate and ask them what they think. Well, if you're a candidate, what would you say? If someone sends you an email when it's obvious what their opinion is, and they're asking you for your opinion, and you know what the right answer is, it's pretty tempting to say, well, really stretch the truth a little bit and make it sound like you're on board, or to give your credentials. Yes, I'm a Catholic. I go to Mass every Sunday, and I've been to a pro-life event, and I know some people who are pro-life, just to try and give their credentials. And sometimes people are deceived by that, frankly, that they're suckered into thinking that someone agrees to them when actually they don't. Or even if they do agree, they've got no intention of acting on those beliefs when they're elected. It would be pretty difficult for a Labour MP to take a strong pro-life position. Certainly, that would be very difficult indeed. So yes, unfortunately, some people are deceived by that and taken in by the candidates, and that's. I mean, how much of a story is it when you've got an email from your candidate saying they're pro-life, but then 5 years later they vote in the opposite direction? Is that a big embarrassment for them? Is that a big news story? Not really. The MP doesn't really care about that. You're basically just no one. It's just one little email. You changed your mind. It was special circumstances. They don't worry about that at all. Which is why I would say, forget about asking your candidate their views. Look at the party policy. Party policy is what counts. When you vote for a representative, the main effect of that vote is which party do you add one to their total of with their representatives, and which party becomes the government, and that party takes your vote as an endorsement, as a mandate for its policies. And I think that's the overwhelming thing. So I think the whole idea of, check what your candidate thinks, I think it's outdated, maybe. Maybe that's a good way to put it. But I don't think it's the most important thing by a mile. Right, good luck. Yeah, thank you very much. Better to be far right than far wrong. Right, well, being far wrong is obviously not good. I mean, by far, I know there is such a thing as far right, where it becomes, sort of racist, aggressive, encouraging hostility between groups. There's an element of the human psyche that's very unfortunate, and that some people like to turn on other groups. They like someone to hate. I mean, the classic example of it is like football, where you get groups of people who absolutely detest each other and hate each other and quite enjoy it. It's like their hobby. And it's over absolutely nothing. Because over, football team, it doesn't mean anything whatsoever. So there's an unfortunate element in the human psyche, which some people enjoy to some degree, turning on a group, turning nasty against them, and attacking them in whatever way. And I think that's what comes through in the far right. It comes through on the far left as well. On the far left, the target of hate is often rich people. Those wealthy people. It's as though they're like stolen our money from us. And on the far left, you get that they hate the police as well, and they hate their nation. That's another thing as well. Hate the institutions of the nation. So, hello, Steph. Nice to hear from you. You simplify politics, Richard. Whereas politicians such as Swinney very deliberately complicate it all. Please keep up your fantastic work with the family party. Thank you very much, Steph. That's I appreciate that compliment. I do feel sometimes I am a simplifier. I think when I was teaching, I would like to think I would sometimes teach things that were quite complicated, quite advanced, but that was a speciality of mine. I like to believe was to simplify things. Maybe you could ask some of my pupils and they'd say I was unsuccessful in that, but yeah, that's certainly something I try to do. Good luck watching from Speyside. I think our Speyside. Have you got candidates in that constituency? Is Ewan Morris your candidate? He might well be. Ewan's going to come on in a little while, actually, all being well. Thank you very much. Right, thanks very much. 2 votes in the House. Excellent. Postal votes already in. Fantastic. We appreciate every vote. Right, what else can I tell you about? Now, did I mention the BBC's rule that Phil Holden made an excellent video about this? The BBC's policy is they're not allowed to use the words pro-life. So they can't describe the family party as a pro-life party. That's against their rules. They have to describe it as an anti-abortion party. Now, if there's a group that's pro-abortion, they can be described as pro-choice, but a pro-life party has to be described as anti-abortion. In other words, bias against the pro-life cause is baked in, is structurally in place in the BBC. Now, you hear them, the popular thing, isn't it? The structural racism, the structural sexism. And often you think, that's rubbish. It's not true. But here, it is in black and white. There is a structural bias in the systems of the BBC about the way they talk about pro-life issues. I mean, how anyone could write that policy and think, yeah, everyone happy with that? We all think this is neutral? Yeah, we're all doing our job, being balanced here? What do you think, everyone happy? Yeah, we're all happy with that. Let's pass it on to the other committee for approval. What do they think? Yep, they're happy with that. And okay, that's our policy then. It just shows that the BBC is blind. Right, moving on. What else have we got? Right, candidates. Candidates being a big story in this election, particularly in every election. There's some candidates that embarrass parties. I mean, we had one. It was very early in the campaign. It was before nominations were in, so we said farewell to him. He's now gone off to stand for another much smaller party than ourselves. I am amazed that they took him on the basis of what had happened and what he'd said that he wouldn't apologize for. And he called a woman as an offensive a term as you could possibly imagine. And was entirely unrepentant. And another party's taken him on as their candidate, which I'm absolutely staggered about. Absolutely staggered. But talking about the Reform Party candidates, they've been in the headlines. My take on all of that, the one chap in particular that they got videoed going around canvassing around the caravan park, basically, I don't believe it. I don't believe he was genuine. He was like a reincarnation of Alf Garnett. It was as though he had a catalogue of unpolitically correct things he needed to say, and he reeled them off one after the other. I don't believe that was genuine. And I think there'll be a great investigation, and I would not be at all surprised if in a few weeks it came out that there was some dodgy business had gone on. And if that comes out, I think people should end up in prison for that. And I get a bit fed up in politics. People are ever saying, oh, they should be locked up. But I think that is a very serious crime. To try and influence an election on that sort of level, on a national scale, through a national media outlet like that, it should be a very, very serious crime. Yeah, because I don't believe that was genuine. But the other things, where it was, established party officials saying things that were pretty unsavory and vulgar, then yeah, is that fair? Does that happen in every party? Was that just unlucky for them? I would say it's not just unlucky. I know quite a few. I've said this before. I know quite a few people involved in reform. Some of those people, you could record half an hour of conversation with them in the pub, and that would finish off their career if they were an MP, say, because that's the way they talk. Everyone needs shooting and bombing, and what? It's just a sort of glib. It's a bit horrible. It's a horrible way of speaking, and that's just the culture. That is the culture. So I think this is not sort of isolated cases within reform. I think that sort of way of speaking and thinking goes with the territory of it's not extreme, but the sort of way towards the right of the mainstream spectrum in British politics. It tends to be people there'll be a lot of people who speak like that. Now, our family party candidates, I think we've been more careful than we have in the past. We've vetted them more carefully. And I think that's the reason why we haven't really had any issues. But someone tried. Have you heard of the Ferret? The Ferret is a sort of online news organization in Scotland. And they actually do some pretty interesting work. They dig up issues and make it into a story. Sometimes they dig up interesting things. Sometimes they dig up like total trivia and try and make it sound as bad as possible as a hit piece, which they've done to the family party a couple of times, if not 3 times. One time was when I got confused about how to do an election return, expenses return, the first time I stood for election. And they did the headline, Scottish Family Party leader breaks electoral law. Okay, I just got mixed up and gave a form in late. Then the other one was, family party leader linked to leader of fascist party or whatever. And that's because Simon Crane, who was in the family party, but left when I made it clear that white nationalism is not our thing. So he left. And anyway, to come to the present day, they sent an email saying, we're going to publish an article about hateful misinformation, etc., like really bad views that candidates hold. And we've got concerns about 4 of your candidates. What have you got to say to this? Well, I did reply. Do you want to hear about it? Do you want to hear these terrible accusations? Do you want to hear the horrific things our candidates have said on social media and elsewhere? It's quite shocking. Are you ready for this? These are things our candidates have said. Let's start with Richard Lucas, shall we? He organized an event called Humza, the Man, the Myth, the Muslim. That's it. That's the whole of the accusation. So that's an example of a candidate saying something hate-filled or misinformation. Now, I don't say anything hateful about saying Humza, the Man, the Myth, the Muslim. I'm not sure it's misinformation. As far as I'm aware, he is a man. I think there is a myth surrounding him. And as far as, some Muslims would disagree there's a Muslim, but he claims to be a Muslim. I mean, that's just bonkers to try and claim that that's somehow hateful or misinformation. Right, now, the next accusation against me, I shared the claim that John Swinney is promoting blatant political indoctrination in schools, as well as vulgar and corrupting sex education. Well, I'm guiltier than charged. I didn't share the claim. I made those claims. It's me that wrote those. I also share the claim about Swinney and bondage, porn, and a certain unorthodox form of sexual intercourse. Well, again, those claims were also from me, and they're also correct about sex education resources. So I replied saying, I stand by those. Here, here's the link. Investigate it yourself. So if you want to be a journalist, check if things are true yourself. Instead of just mudslinging, check it yourself. So that's me. That's one of the 4 candidates they dealt with. Right, the next candidate, Hamish Goldie Scott. Right, they accused him of being, hate-filled and spreading misinformation. Let's see what he said. He claimed on Facebook that there is LGBT indoctrination happening in schools. So in other words, he read from family party policy. That is obviously your view. There's LGBT indoctrination in schools. And the Ferret's got this. This is one of their nuggets that they've unearthed to show how bad our candidates are. Right, next one, Graham Crabe. He said low emission zones are about control. Speaking at a meeting organized by an organization opposing them. Low emission zones are about control. Well, of course they are. They're about controlling what vehicles go in and out of town centres, for example. Now, I guess within the wider context, Graham was probably talking about, the council of the government, that they're control freaks. They like controlling us too much. They're forgetting about our freedom. It's a perfectly valid point to make. And on net zero, Graham said it doesn't come from a place of necessity, it comes from a place of we're the government and you guys just have to deal with it. Right, net zero, is net zero a necessity? Well, net zero by which date? I mean, can we say like 2030, that's a necessity. 2029, that's not a necessity. So again, what Graham said, the sentence they've picked out, I mean, quite reasonable. It could be part of a sensible view on the matter. So the further on our last candidate in the firing line that they've unearthed this hateful rhetoric and misinformation from, it's Leo Lanahan, our chairman. He shared the claim that abortion will see the Scottish population drop to just over 3,000 people in the next 300 years. Right, that was a calculation that we made ourselves on the basis of the well-established mathematical equations to do that. So yes, that is exactly what we claim. So again, the Ferret, instead of saying, no, those statistics are wrong, show us your calculations, it's just, no, that's hate-filled misinformation. It's true. It's true. I mean, if the Ferret, so dear Ferret, have you got anyone with any mathematical ability who'd like to assess our calculations? We're happy to share it with you. Anyway, right. And Leo also shared the claim that the UN promotes sex with minors. Again, that was a link to an article in LifeSite News where it linked to UN statements, documents, treaties, etc. that did. Basically, that they were saying, sex with children is okay. Children are sexual beings, etc. You've heard it all before. So again, instead of saying, where's your evidence? They just assume it's not true, and they're ready to sling some mud. And the last one, how about this? He shared an image suggesting John Swinney approves images of bondage, mature porn, and anal sex masturbation for use in schools. Now, that was a photograph of, remember when we put that big board in front of John Swinney's window of his constituency office with the worst images from the sex education resources that he was promoting? So that's what we did. Leo Lanahan reshared that. We shared it when John Swinney became First Minister. And they're claiming this is like hate-filled misinformation. I mean, utterly bizarre. So I replied to the Ferret, pointing this out to them, and we will see what they make of it. But that's the story there. Now, just to empathize with reform as well, because one of the issues was, someone came along and helped. They volunteered, they came along and helped, and then it turned out they had, outrageous views. Now, this happened with the Family Party. In the last by-election campaign, a young man came along and he held a placard in the street and gave some leaflets out. I had a little chat to him one day. Fine, it's quite quiet. I had a chat to him the next day. I said, "What's your job?" He said, I haven't got a job. I'm waiting for a court appearance. I said, "Oh, right, okay. What's that about?" He said, "Oh, it's for stirring up racial hatred." I thought, "Okay, what happened?" He said, "Well, I was talking to some of the kids outside the school, and someone videoed it, and it's ended up in court. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that ridiculous?" So he told me his name. So I looked up the story. What had happened is he was like holding court with a group of school children outside a school, elucidating the virtues of Hitler's philosophy, saying to them basically Hitler had the right idea. And he said, that they're accusing me of being a neo-Nazi. I said, well, that's probably sounds quite reasonable on the basis of that. But he came along and helped us one day. I didn't know who he was. So if someone had come along and spoken to him and found that out, the headline could have been, Scottish Family Party campaigner. But what can you do about that? I mean, you have volunteers come to help you. He could go and volunteer at the local food bank. He could go and volunteer anywhere he liked. I mean, people don't give you that. Put you on a lie detector and check all your opinions. So it can happen to parties, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything. Last night's live stream, a lady called, Chair Chorus. I can't remember her name exactly. But to cut a long story short, I was aware of her on Twitter. She's got an interesting view. Her view is basically, she says, I'm not a Muslim, but we need the values of the Quran, socially conservative values of the Quran. So I thought, that's quite intriguing. That's novel. So I invited her onto the live stream. But before she came on, someone pointed out and sent me photographs of her dressed up as a Nazi with a gun. And like totally off the wall. And she was floating around in the comments of the live stream last night. I haven't got around to blocking her on Twitter, actually. Again, it's not our fault. It's not our fault. I've got nothing, no positive regard for her whatsoever. And then last night on the live stream as well, there was someone making anti-Semitic comments, which I have to say on the live stream, it's not that unusual for someone coming on taking it's all the Jews. Goes back to the Jews. That they're the real root of the problem. I mean, we've got no time for that. Why ever they're floating around the family party? We've got no time for that whatsoever. If you want like sort of anti-Semitism, I mean, you're probably better off going to the Greens than coming to the family party. So anyway, I'm just pointing out that you can't control who floats around your party. You can make your own values clear, but ultimately people might appear that might not have the views that you would want to be associated with. Right, let's go back through a few comments. In fact, that's interesting, actually. It's already been exposed. All right, that's good. Yes, exposed he is an actor who is paid for acting, but I don't think it's been proved that he was being paid to act there. I mean, he may not have been paid. Even if he wasn't paid, he could have done that as a volunteer. There's plenty of people who would be very keen to sway the results of the election quite significantly by a morning's work, a dishonest morning's work. Now, it reminded me of Alf Garnett as well. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. John's back. So if I decide to vote for the Scottish Family Party instead of tactically, won't it take too long to make a difference? Labour will have made so much irreversible damage by the time the change we want comes. What I would say about that is in politics, things can change more quickly than anyone ever expected. You never know how quickly things are going to change. The other thing I say, just sticking to the pro-life issue as an example of a policy area. So if you did vote for one of the other parties tactically, that is no step whatsoever towards the right direction in terms of pro-life. So if you voted Conservative or SNP or Labour instead of, in terms of the pro-life issue, it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't bring us in the positive direction at all. We're only going to head in the positive direction in Scotland through the family party. So that's what I would say there. Again, come back on me if you want to make another comment, which I select you might well have. You can't be Catholic and pro-abortion. I would certainly have thought that. You might have said you can't be Muslim and like sort of endorsing the whole LGBT agenda as well. But Humza Yousaf seems to manage it, and Sadiq Khan. But the reason they manage that, I think, is a lot of Muslims and Catholics and other types of Christians as well. I think they're persuaded by the badge. When the person says, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Muslim, a lot of Catholics, Muslims, others as Christians as well, they think, oh, that's great. He's on my team. I'm going to vote for him or her. But it's the badge doesn't matter. It's the values, it's the votes, it's what the person says that really matters. Right, okay. Hello, Mr. Espy. Good to see the real-time damage that's been done to the SRP because of me and others like me. Right, okay, right, whatever. List of everyone you hate, please. Oh dear, where do we start with that? Well, we don't start anywhere. I'm a Christian and I endeavor not to hate anybody. So that's that. I didn't answer your question. Okay, you can ask it again. I will have a look at that again. Just look at a few more points. We've got a few opponents here, but the people who are anti the family party, if you want to make anything that's not intelligible and a coherent point, I'll respond to it. But so far, we haven't gone there. Right. SFP don't go near race or the Jewish question, just the groomers. We don't go near race. I don't think race is a fruitful political topic. I think race is often used as a proxy for other issues, which might mean like culture or level of immigration or integration or whatever. These are valid issues to talk about, but race itself, I think, is a total dead end political issue, because if you start making race the issue, and if you see race as a problem, then what can you do about it? I mean, the only thing to do about it is deportations, and you're way off the scale of acceptable views if you're going towards that. Because if someone's been welcomed to the country, given citizenship or whatever, then that is not a moral option. I mean, in terms of other issues within race, race is a political dead end. The people who want to bring race into politics, that's the Labour Party and the SNP and the Greens especially, but the Labour Party in particular have put it in their manifesto to introduce this like race pay gap policy. So basically, they want people to be promoted at work according to their race. They want their race to be a factor in deciding who gets the top job, who gets promoted up the ladder. I think that is really, really appalling. Right, hello. Just subscribe from Europe. Excellent. We welcome support from around the world. We've got a lot of people who follow us in all sorts of places. Got to register and build up the pro-life vote. Absolutely. Register your view. Register the pro-life view, and it builds up and builds up. It gets taken more and more seriously, and then more and more people are willing to say it as well. Now, the more votes we get, the more protected people are to speak freely. So if the Scottish Family Party, let's say, was getting 10% of the vote, then people have a hard job for firing you for agreeing with something that 10% of the electorate are voting for. So I think it emboldens other people, and it expands freedom of speech. Right. Let's see what else we've got. I think we can bring in thank you. Appreciate that. So we've got, it's my Hall of Fame there. We've got some of my favorite drivers. We've got Michael Schumacher, Nigel Mansell, Ayrton Senna, Lewis Hamilton, and Max Verstappen's yellow nose is just sticking out. I was a huge Lewis Hamilton fan for most of his career, a massive fan. I thought it was brilliant. But then he went political, and dear, oh dear, he can retire anytime now. Lando Norris is doing extremely well, and George Russell's pretty good as well. So I think we will have a new British hero or two in the Formula One. Okay, I think it's time to bring in our visitor. Welcome, Ewan.
Right, hello. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Ewan is our candidate in a constituency with a long name. What is it again?
It's Murray West, Nairn and Strathspey. It's a whopper.
Right. Probably long in name and large in area as well. Ewan's also the Northeast chairman of the Scottish Family Party. So as I said, the candidates, if anyone wants to come on and tell a story or just talk a bit about the campaign, they could do so. So Ewan, take it away. What's been going on up there? You had hustings or two, I see, did you?
Yeah. So it's been quite busy actually. I've done 3 hustings now, 2 in my area and 1 for Aberdeen. The first one was a business hustings. So the focus of that was obviously on the local trade and tourism industry. And so it was quite a good chat. You know, I got on quite well with a lot of folk there. the second set of hustings was in Findhorn at the Eco Village. It was very green heavy, but it was still a very pleasant crowd, very respectful. And I'm quite glad of that, because sometimes when you go to hustings, folk like to shout and scream, even candidates, you know. It's the final hustings I did was Women Won't Weesht in Aberdeen. They were a lovely lot. Yes, we didn't get on quite perfectly, but I think they were a very respectful bunch, you know, very sensible.
So how did the repeal the Gender Recognition Act policy go down with them?
Went down very well. I think Alapa are trying to steal it. We'll see. I think that's going to be their 2026 kind of policy.
They're a bit late then, because it's a reserved matter.
Well, I know that I know they're looking to implement that, so we'll soon see.
Yeah, I think I've heard other commentators starting to say, you know, why doesn't such and such a party take that policy? But as usual, as ever, the family party is the forefront of thinking and taking the initiative with these things. So yeah, the other parties. It would make sense for Alba to follow. I'm not sure, but we shall see. We shall see.
Yeah.
What other issues are coming up?
So, you know, it'd be nice for me to sit here and tell you what to do in an election campaign. You know, it's been a learning experience, but I think it's easier to say what not to do. And I've seen quite a lot of that throughout the campaign. The first big what not to do was in Aberdeen. Our candidate Graham Craig went to his first hustings. It was one of the first of the season, and he did extremely well. But the Conservative candidate for Arbroath decided to get into a shouting match in front of the audience with I think a pro-Palestine protester, and it was just so embarrassing to sit there and listen to a politician lose his cool and basically start shouting at a room full of folk. He basically, he was shouting at the top of his lungs and swearing and all of this. It was just unprofessional.
Yeah, we had a classic case of that in the Hamilton, Rutherglen Hamilton West by-election campaign. The Reform candidate, the Women Won't Weesht hustings, the Reform candidate just sort of took issue with them on something, and again he sort of lost his temper and got really heated and he stormed out.
Well, I think they were bringing up about domestic abuse, say, being perpetrated mainly by men, and he took issue because he basically said, you know, not all men, which it was a point they had already made, was yes, you know, not all men hit their wives and all that, obviously. But another thing he had said was, in response to that question about what should they do to reduce abuse, he basically said, well, I don't beat my wife, and that didn't go down well. That was why he stormed out. But you know, in this one up in Aberdeen where the Tories started shouting, Graham was extremely good. You know, I was really impressed with his response. He basically turned around and said, you know, we're adults here. Let's sit down and have a conversation we're here to have. And he got a real round of applause. And I think that's how you do it. You don't sit and argue with the audience.
No. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, those of you watching, I mean, it could be you next time. Be a candidate. Do our training. We call it training. It's partly training. It's partly for you to learn about what's involved and help you to make your decision. But do think about it. I mean, it's an amazing experience being a candidate. I mean, you're starting young on this. Tell us about some other experiences you've had. How's it been? So
another one of what not to do. I kind of point to the Lib Dem campaign up here as a don't do this, because they have missed out their imprints, is what you call it when you put it on a post. They've missed out their imprints on their posts. They've put up posters in the wrong places. They've and the best one was this: every single hustings they've had a big gaffe. So the first hustings was hosted by the Chamber of Commerce, and then they immediately put out a post thanking the DYW Murray for hosting, when it was a completely different company, you know. And so that was rather embarrassing, thanking the wrong people. And then at the other hustings, he ended up talking about national service that came up, and he started talking about North Korea's national service program, and what he actually meant to talk about was South Korea's program. And so I picked him up on he muddled up his Koreas, and I thought that was just hilarious.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing the quality of the candidates. Generally, I'd have to say that for the main parties, most of the candidates I've come across, I mean, they are presentable. They seem reasonably competent. I've come across a couple that weren't, but they're generally sort of okay. Some of the smaller parties candidates I've come across have been very, very, very weak. But I think our candidates this time were great. It's definitely our best set of candidates. We put out the A team this time. So, yeah. Anything else to share with us, or?
Well. That's more or less it. I mean, I've had a pretty exciting campaign. This is my first kind of election, so that's been interesting. It's been a learning experience to say the least. Getting used to the hate mail as well as the nice mail is good. But another thing was, obviously, this year I've become a Christian, and I actually got baptized just on Sunday. So that's a nice end to my campaign, was getting, baptized. And so the kind of...
Very good. Very good. Just on the mail point of view, I said earlier on, I think I had more emails from pro-lifers than every other issue put together. Did you find that?
Absolutely, it was kind of the biggest issue. The other big issue was the Palestine issue. But I think even the pro-life emails, even without SPUC, they were outnumbering everything 2-1, 3-1, 4-1.
Yeah. I was saying earlier on, I don't know if you're listening, I was saying, in a sense, it's great news if people are using that to base their vote on it. If people are thinking they're affecting the candidates by it, well, they're not. They're already winning, but it's not affecting the candidates' views or votes or whatever. But if people wanted to find out in order to inform their vote, then absolutely fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And in my constituency, I must have had 20 or 30. But with one constituency, that's quite a lot of people, isn't it? That's a decent whack of people. Don't go where you are. Let's have a look at some of these issues. You can chip in as well. Another one from Robert. What are your views on the relationship between the church and state should be ideally? Well, I'm a secularist, and I don't think there should be any formal relationship between the church and the state. Now, if the states want to have, it's opening a parliament in a church or have people praying at things, then that's great. But in terms of the formal operation of the government and the constitution, then I think that should be secular. Where I think Christian values come in is through the democratic process. I would want a nation where people elect representatives with what I think are the right values, which would reflect Christian values. So that's where I would hope Christian influence would come into politics, not by the government declaring Scotland is now a Christian country or whatever. So that's my take on that. Anything to add to that, Ewan?
So yeah, I would agree. The church and state should be separate, but I think a lot of folk kind of misunderstand when we talk about church and state being separate, and they think that means there cannot be any religious kind of involvement in schools or anything at any level, and that's not what it means. It basically means the government shouldn't be able to influence the church and say, you can't teach this, you can't do that, you can't act this way, and the church shouldn't be allowed to tell the government, you can't do this, you can't act this way. It's essentially allowing the free and open society. And you're right that Christian values can be, influenced through elections. We can vote for values that we agree with.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, the church can tell the government what it likes, but that's not binding. There's not some special aspect of the Constitution that says it has to be listened to. I mean, an example of, if you look at, say, Iran, where there's the Muslim Council of Elders or whatever they're called, and they basically run the shop, and the democracy is under their supervision. They decide who the election candidates can be. They decide what policies can be passed or not. I mean, I think that's an example of a case where a religious body has got authority, special authority within the Constitution. And I don't think that is the way to go at all. Right, moving on to more important issues here. Are you a motor racing fan, Ewan?
I'm not a big motor racing fan. I know my Verstappens and Hamiltons, but not much further than that.
All right, okay. Right, I'll just carry on this private conversation with this gentleman or lady. I'm not quite sure. Same about Hamilton. Yes, absolutely. Went political, and yeah, I've had enough. Senna's the greatest. Love Mansell a lot. Yeah, absolutely. Mansell was the most exciting driver ever. Yeah, it was great to watch him. Right, let's see what else we've got. coming up here. Pro-life, including the lives of children and families in Gaza. You can certainly take it for granted that any suffering of non-competence or whatever anywhere in the world is a grave concern. In terms of the family party, say foreign policy is not our main emphasis, but there are lots of trouble spots around the world, and trying to achieve peace in them is a very important goal. I think in a lot of areas, there's the practicalities, there's the short term, trying to stop the fighting, trying to get aid and whatever. In the longer term, it's often a matter of trying to achieve some degree of harmony, to diffuse hatreds, to enable a longer term coexistence. That's a very different project, a very challenging project, but we certainly support all aspects of that. That is for sure. Right, let's have a look. Right, that's an interesting one. Right, James. I don't think we've met, but right, James, welcome. Right, why don't the Scottish Family Party make it public? Churches have been hushed as they are putting money before God. Right, okay, I guess what you're thinking about that, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong. Well, I'll say there's two things you might be thinking. You might be thinking the churches are thinking if they speak out too much on controversial issues, it will hit their income. I'm not sure churches think that too much, but I suspect what you're referring to is that the churches and a lot of campaigning groups are charities, and they believe that because they're charities, they're not allowed to engage in sort of direct political campaigning or endorsement or whatever, which is technically true. I would say to some campaigning groups, ditch charitable status. What's more important to you? Being able to do your job, to speak freely about these things, to have an impact in politics as well? Is that not more important than a bit more money? I would suggest it is in many cases. For churches, even in the absence of the sort of charity restrictions, I think a church should be cautious of endorsing a political party. I think a church or a mosque or whatever, what's good for them to do is to say, this is what's important. These are the values we want. These are the policies we want. Produce a table. This shows what the parties think, and it should be absolutely crystal clear which parties line up with those values. And I think if churches did that, that would be good. Yeah, talking about losing charitable status. Yeah, I think quite a few organizations are a bit paranoid about charitable status. And it is a financial concern. It's not just they like being called a charity. It's just a financial hit if you lose charitable status. But I've got a lot of time for organizations that take the decision to say, we're not compromising. We're not letting the government have an influence on our affairs by being a charity. We'd rather have a bit less money and be totally free from the threat of government interference. So that's that. From Hong Kong. All right, excellent. We'll vote for the family party tomorrow. Thank you very much. Are you someone who's come from Hong Kong recently? I actually spoke in a church a couple of Sundays ago in Edinburgh that comprised Hong Kong people from Hong Kong. The service was in Chinese, and I had a chat to a lot of them. Yeah. So Bill DeLee, are you someone who's come from Hong Kong recently? Or I assume you must be if you're saying you're going to be voting tomorrow. The church I went to with a lot of Hong Kong people, some of the people said there's lots of other Chinese Hong Kong churches in Edinburgh, and they were saying they're going to try and put me in touch with someone. I would be delighted to go and speak at any of those. Right, Michael, best of luck. May those who can vote do so supporting groups like the SFP across the country. Fortunately, I can't vote even with settled status. Well, I'm not sure how that system works, but yeah, certainly. And those of you who don't have a candidate in the constituency, what am I going to say, you? And you can guess what I'm going to say, can you? If you haven't got a Scottish Family Party candidate this time, you be the candidate next time. Vote for yourself. Who better to vote for? You're never going to vote for anyone you agree with more than if you vote for yourself. So.
Well, I don't know. I still haven't made my mind up for tomorrow.
You live in your own constituency, don't you?
Yeah.
Right. When was there a story about that? There was a story about someone not voting for their party or something. I can't remember the details. From Hong Kong. Okay, right, great. Yeah, right. Appreciate your support. I saw on social media an SNP candidate state that she was a Pakistani Muslim. I want her and everyone in Scotland to be Scottish before any religion. Now, I think that's an interesting question. Now, if someone is describing and saying that I am an, my family, parents came from Pakistan, or I've moved here from Pakistan, if someone wants to say that, that's part of their story, then absolutely fine. You could say it's even part of who they are. That's fine. But when it comes to politics, I don't want people to be putting themselves forward primarily as a representative of an identity group. I just want to hear what they've got to stand for. Similarly, if someone says they're a Muslim, okay, I'm sort of not particularly interested in that. I just want to know what you stand for. Someone says there are some Muslims in Britain who believe things that I vehemently disagree with. I think, with some Muslims, absolute anti-democratic views, etc. But there's Muslims in the family party who are socially conservative and accept the sort of democratic consensus in Britain. So great to come and join the family party. Yeah, but if someone's putting that forward front and center, this is the sort of person I am, so you can vote for me on that basis, then I think that is completely wrong. Right, David, interesting photograph. Does that reflect your line of work, I wonder? I'm imagining your job is climbing up pylons, fixing things. I got all my candidates' leaflets through the door this morning. Only one has a clear stance on single-sex spaces. Only one can get my vote. Right. So who is the one? Would that be? It's going to be Family Party or Alba. I mean, Reform. Do they probably get the single-sex spaces? I think on the trans thing, the feminists are hot on the single-sex spaces. They're not so hot on children getting confused at school and all that sort of side of it. They will deal with that a little bit, but it's not their main focus. Their main focus is, we're not having men coming into things that are for women, because in some cases, because they're quite anti-men. So it's not so much that it's someone who's dressing up as a woman. It's just that it's a man coming in here. So Alba, yeah, okay. We would say with Alba, of course, that they're dealing with the symptoms, not with the core of the problem, which is the fact that it's legal for a man to become a woman. The law says that can happen. Right, media attention. Did you get any media attention in the campaign, Ewan? Any local papers?
I got a few in the newspaper. a few articles and things. So it was all right. It wasn't as much as the rest of them, but
yeah, I mean, the BBC give us a tiny little bit, and the main interview was a sort of hit piece equivalent. For most of the media, they're not restricted by any sort of rules. They don't have to give people coverage. And basically, this is another thing with our votes. The more votes we get, the more media attention we get. So with the media, we've tried to approach the media, tried to give them stories, but that they willfully ignore us. It's not that the things we've given them are not newsworthy. They are. Sometimes they'll publish the story, but do everything they can to not mention the family party, even though it's a story that we brought to light, we've given to them. But as the party gets bigger, they won't be able to ignore us. Like if you think, say, like the Guardian newspaper, they would have been delighted to completely ignore the Reform Party, but they can't anymore because it's too big. So the more votes we get, the harder we are to ignore in the media, I would say. Well, I think that's 10 past 10. It's probably time to wind things up. Obviously, to finish, don't forget your photo ID and go and vote for us if you can. If there's anyone else you'd encourage to vote for us who lives in a constituency where we've got a candidate, we obviously appreciate every vote. So tomorrow, I'm heading off on holiday tomorrow, but on Friday morning, I'll do a summary of our results. We'll put some things on social media, just a bit of an update of how we've done. And then we'll be springing into action after the summer. We're having a mini conference up in the northeast in Gordon Castle near to Fochabers. It's part of the Refuel Christian Conference, but our conference it's open to anyone. The main conference is free. You just turn up at the right time. You can walk in. You can come to our conference at it. It's on Wednesday, I think it might be 24th of July. Check our social media in any case, but do make it along to that. If you can combine that with your holiday plans, we would Love to see you. So thanks for watching. Thanks for your comments. Ewan, thank you for joining us and sharing a few thoughts. And yeah, thanks for your votes tomorrow. Good night.